Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome here today. I am not your host for today's program, but I thought I might take executive director privilege and take the mic for a minute. Just wanted to say a special thank you so much for coming to this program. Under the circumstances and the ways in which refugees and immigrants are being targeted in our communities, it's really important to learn from each other, from like-minded communities, Des Moines and Polk County, Iowa City and Johnson County, about how we can actively, proactively support, learn from, learn with, support, and create welcoming communities. This is a particular program that when Mak and I first talked about it, I thought, we need to do an ICFRC program on this. I need to get Mak and Stephanie here. And so I'm grateful to both of them that they have taken our invitation, and I'm eager for you to learn from and learn with them and to create bridges between our two communities about how we can all do this very important and necessary work together. With that, I'll turn it over to our host, Daniel. Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Not executive director and not host, but I am an ICFRC board member. My name is Daniel Vorwerk, and we are so excited for you all to be here today. And we welcome you all here to the public library and those joining us via live stream to our Iowa City Foreign Relations Council program featuring Mak Sućeska and Stephanie Moris, speaking on the topic of global neighbors, welcoming and supporting new Iowans in Des Moines. Just as a quick reminder, we plan for this program to go till 1 p.m. Today is our fourth program in our spring 2025 lineup, and we're also halfway through our new four-part series, The Changing Environment, Adaptation, Resilience, and Sustainability. More information about that series is available on our website and at our tables if you're here in person. We are deeply grateful for the longstanding support from our community. Your help has allowed our organization to grow for 41 years, hosting speaker programs with experts joining us from around the world, both in person and virtually. As a small nonprofit, though, we exist because of the generosity of individuals like you. As we head into 2025, opportunities for nonprofit funding beyond individuals is becoming more difficult as charitable organizations like ours face uncertain futures, especially when focused on uplifting research and stories, advocating for marginalized, vulnerable, and international communities. So please consider donating by cash or check, or if you're here in person, you can donate by scanning that QR code at the table in front of you, so that way we can keep our programs free as we head into the future. ICFRC would like to give a heartfelt thanks to our sponsors and partners today, including Midwest One Bank and, of course, the Iowa City Public Library, for providing partnerships, space, and today's food. So if we could get a quick round of applause for all their support. Our next program will be Saturday, March 29th at 10 a.m. at the Universalist Society of Coralville. That program is titled Green Architecture, Building for the Future. Join us for an inspiring panel discussion exploring the intersection of sustainability and design with Keith Porter from the Stanley Center for Peace and Security, Sally Obernolte from Newman Architect, and Deb Schollerman from the Unitarian Universalist Society in Coralville. Together, they will delve into the transformative role of sustainable building practices in addressing climate change. Highlights include a closer look at Stanley's International Living Building Challenge certified facility and how people interact with these transformative green spaces. This engaging conversation promises to ignite ideas and demonstrate how innovation and commitment can lead to a healthier, more sustainable future for all. So please see our website, icfrc.org, for the rest of this spring's programs. And with that, I would like now to introduce our speakers today. So we have Mak Sućeska. Mak. Oh my goodness, I said it.
Not the first nor last.
I know. Serves as the manager of operations for Global Neighbors, Immigrants, and Refugee Welcome Center through Polk County. Mak originates from Sarajevo, Sarajevo, Bosnia, and was transplanted to Des Moines in 1993 as a refugee, fleeing from war-torn Yugoslavia with his family. Mak's professional career has been devoted to advocating and supporting refugees and immigrants across the state in an effort to promote a more equitable community for all. With over 14 years of experience in nonprofits, state, and county government, it's Mak's life journey that provides a unique and necessary perspective in guiding his work. Mak completed his political science and undergraduate studies at the University of Iowa with a double minor in religion and history, and he achieved his CPM and MPA degree through Drake University with an emphasis on public policy, and plans to pursue his doctoral degree in educational leadership through Drake University. In Mak's words, education, accessibility, and opportunity are the keys to success. Stephanie Moris is the director of the Refugee Alliance of Central Iowa. She has been involved with the Alliance since 2013 and has worked with refugee and immigrant communities in education, employment, and wraparound direct case management before joining RACI. Stephanie attained her bachelor's degree from Iowa State University and worked in the Dominican Republic for 3 years, where she met her husband. Outside of work, Stephanie is very passionate about empowering our refugee and immigrant communities, immigration rights, and connecting our community together. She volunteers as a mentor and teaches Spanish. Please join me in welcoming Mak and Stephanie.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction and welcome. It's always nice coming back to the old stomping grounds. I will be walking back and forth, as we talked earlier, Peter and I, wandering. I spent a lot of years wandering in Iowa City, so I feel very familiar and comfortable walking and engaging with the audience. So thank you again for the opportunity to come and talk about Global Neighbors, not just as a physical location or space for immigrants and refugees, but as a mission and vision when we talk about supporting newcomers and new Iowans to the state, whether that is Central Iowa and Polk County, here in Iowa City and Johnson County, or wherever we have populations of refugees and immigrants across our state. This project itself started many years ago as a concept and as a result of the community coming together to identify what gaps existed within the overall service provision for immigrants and refugees as they were seeking to start their new lives with the hope and goal of successfully integrating into their new communities. We, as a community in Central Iowa, early on did several surveys and assessments, case studies that were done through interviews with the refugee and immigrant populations.
I'm so sorry. Let me check the mic. It's not on for some reason. I'm so sorry.
We're just going to amplify my voice even more.
There you go.
There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. This project started really with engaging the community and identifying, again, where those gaps existed through surveys, assessments, community conversations, to better understand from the refugees and immigrants themselves on what those challenges were towards their journey and experience integrating to Iowa and their new community. As you can imagine, this work was intentional early on in ensuring that it was refugee and immigrant centered. This project where we are today is a direct result of the feedback and input we got from newly arrived refugees, immigrants that have been here for some time, and everyone in between. It was important not only to hear from refugees at first and foremost, but also service providers, nonprofits, those in other areas around health services, transportation, and housing, on what challenges they were seeing from their end when working with this particular demographic and population, and also how to learn to best support these individuals with those circumstances they were facing. And lastly, through a research and development phase, we really developed a project that is a culmination today that we're calling Global Neighbors. I can't take the credit for the name. It was a colleague of mine who was involved in this work, but Global Neighbors is very fitting. Not only, again, as a space for refugees and immigrants to call home once they make their way to Polk County, but also for service providers, partners, and others who are interested in working as a collective and a collaborative under one roof within the same space towards the same mission. So jumping into the next sort of point of my presentation, we will delve a little bit deeper into Global Neighbors, the space itself, the idea behind it, who is going to be within our organization and space, and how we are going to be supporting the broader community. So, if you are familiar with Des Moines or know at least the layout of Des Moines somewhat, Global Neighbors in itself is located at an old DHS or now HHS building that used to serve as income maintenance support for those applying for public benefits. So if you're applying for cash assistance, Medicaid, food assistance, you would go to this particular place, receive an interview, get approved, and be on your way. When COVID hit, this building was empty because everyone was work from home. It was a building that started to dilapidate a little bit, and ironically, it was owned by the county. So with the sort of mass exodus of staff from that building, having a centralized location that was empty, it was a natural fit for Polk County to look at, from a cost savings perspective, of course, how can we utilize space that we already have to continue to invest in this project and to hopefully build out Global Neighbors as we know it today. We did a community-wide assessment in identifying ECBOs. Those are ethnic community-based organizations, nonprofits, and other partners who are either directly in the space of supporting refugees through their program and organization, or had some sort of component in supporting non-native English speakers. We did a map to identify really where they were in vicinity and proximity to Global Neighbors, and if Global Neighbors in that space actually made sense. Just because it was a free building, just because we were able to maybe save in some areas, doesn't necessarily mean it was most conducive to the need of that community. Fortunately, it really was. When you look at the the outskirts of this diagram and map, the furthest point, which is at the bottom of your screen, to where Global Neighbors is essentially located, is around a 10-minute drive. Which, for some, if they don't have means to their own transportation, may be challenging. Public transportation is roughly 30 to 45 minutes. Fortunately enough, the lowest point on that map is actually the Des Moines Public Schools Welcome Center. This is a place where new immigrant and refugee families go to get enrolled. They do different ELL assessments. They've actually expressed interest in relocating to Global Neighbors. So as you'll see later in the presentation, we actually carved out a space for them so we could partner together in that area in supporting refugee and immigrant kiddos. Jumping now into really the heart of Global Neighbors, this is how some 16,000 square feet will be divvied up into a centralized one-stop shop for immigrants and refugees. When considering the feedback that we got from the community, it was one of the things that really surfaced was needing a space to not just co-locate, but to also have classroom space for education opportunities, to potentially have a health clinic. We might be working with Broadlawns Medical Center. They will have a satellite office within Global Neighbors to help provide that first initial refugee physical, any follow-up immunizations, and other health needs that may arise that the community presents. We also looked into what it would what it would entail to have a co-location for ECBOs to actually function within. Many of our ECBO partners who have 501 status do not have a sustainable or quite viable nonprofit. So a lot of their costs are minimal to none, volunteer-based. And so with the county leading these efforts and with county dollars, this space can be utilized for these nonprofits and ECBOs as a permanent office space. They would have access to cubicles and different private offices. They would have access to classrooms in our computer lab at no cost to them. One of the challenges that that we foresee with this particular model, and unique, might I add, to other welcome centers that I researched across the country, including 2 in Canada, is that many of these groups historically have not collaborated or really worked together on an intentional basis. Sure, we have platforms like through the Refugee Alliance of Central Iowa that Stephanie will talk about, but having a location or a space dedicated to overall immigrant groups coming together to voice their concerns, to overcome certain challenges, and really to create sort of an advocacy approach for the work that we will be doing is a unique model, and especially for the state of Iowa and Polk County. So the idea in having some 14 to 20 non-ECBO partners represented from the Afghan community, African diaspora, Burmese ethnicities, some Latino and Latinx ECBOs and nonprofits, we are really creating an environment and a location where these communities can come together, learn from one another, and also move some of this work forward as we talk about immigrant and refugee needs. So I'm very proud of this space and where we've how far we've come. This is a project that started in 2017. Unfortunately, some partnerships failed, and this project kind of went to the wayside. We were able to revitalize it through really the effort and intentionality behind Polk County in putting the dollars behind the work, leveraging the infrastructure it has, and to really have a unanimous support from our 5 supervisors on this project itself and the impact that it will do, not just for, at the time, unfortunately, newly arrived refugees, but those who have arrived, have made Polk County their home, and subsequent immigrant groups that are going to still continue to make their way some way or another. So I will just kind of walk you through the flow of the space. We worked with the local architecture and engineering firm, BBS, that really listened to the communities through these conversations and put together a space that was conducive to safety, welcoming, and ensuring the success of these up-and-coming ECBOs. So the bottom area of the screen is going to be sort of our welcome green space plaza for the community. We will have benches, different potential architectural sculptures, and also just an area that people can kind of unwind. We might have some elevated gardens that really creates that optic of welcoming and life, so to speak. When individuals are coming from the circumstances they do, we want to ensure that we are welcoming them with warm and open arms. As you make your way through the entire center, myself and Stephanie will be the staff working permanently within Global Neighbors. But then we have classrooms and a computer lab. Those 2 classrooms are modular, can be configured to one large space. A lot of feedback that we received was, we have community celebrations and different gatherings, but we don't have a space to go to. Can we use Global Neighbors? And the short answer is yes. Of course, within reason. We won't be able to accommodate hundreds and thousands of people, but smaller gatherings and celebrations, absolutely. So those classrooms, although there are 2, can be configured into one. We have a computer lab that we've dedicated for digital literacy classes and just to have open hours for individuals who may not have access to computers or digital means. They can come and access that through Global Neighbors. Again, moving left, we have the clinic with that Broadlawns, or maybe Des Moines University will become a partner. And then we have the ECBO open space. These are sort of cubicle space where people can come plug and play, use remotely or indefinitely on a permanent basis. We have with some of our ECBOs that will be utilizing that. Then our shared private offices, that was also a big concern and point of feedback. Many of the discussions and interactions our ECBOs have with their community members they support and represent, there are confidential and sensitive discussions that are had. So we wanted to ensure there was private space and offices for them to use. Des Moines Public Schools, going to your right, will be there and hopefully a space for their bilingual family liaisons. These are essentially social work case workers who work with ELL families and students, but they don't have a home base. They are functioning right now out of a local high school, just in a classroom. So we decided, how can we partner for them to have a centralized location to work within that they can also call home. And then we have a rest gathering area, a pretty standard small kitchenette. We have 2 gendered and 2 non-gendered restrooms. We also have a wellness space that can be used as a prayer room or a room for mental health and whatever one sees fit to kind of decompress, separate, and go into there to relax a little bit. So that's Global Neighbors. That is the center that right now it will be under construction in the next 2 to 3 months. It is a roughly $4 to $4.5 million project where hopefully we might come under budget, which would save some taxpayer dollars, but we have the investment for the community in this space. Because I think the vision and the mission behind it is not just for initial refugee resettlement or immigrants and refugees accessing this and then kind of being done with it. We're looking at a long-term integrative perspective, offering legal services. I see Professor Braun back there, legal services in partnership with some of our legal partners locally in Des Moines. We're looking at, obviously, health clinics where people could potentially establish a long-term health home. We will have different classes around integration, public safety, you name it. We're exploring all options, of course, again, within reason. But we want this to be a long-term project that helps refugees and immigrants towards their successful long-term integration in Polk County. Another exciting piece is we really want to emphasize the arts with Global Neighbors. There was a big point of feedback around how do we use art to share and express our journey and message of coming to Iowa and what art means culturally across the globe. So we will be commissioning and putting out an RFP that will be specifically tailored for refugee and immigrant artists to consider submitting a bid to put in murals on the outside of our building as well as on the inside. As you can see, this is just an example rendering of where the art and murals would go, but we're very excited for this particular project because we know there are a lot of talented people within our community who are going to contribute to this space. This is a bird's eye view, 3D view of the actual space itself and what it will look like once it's fully complete. And then this would be the mural that would, where a mural would potentially go on the outside of the building. So we're very excited for this work. It's been a long time coming. We know that the community, this is something that is greatly needed, especially in the current times that we are in with the impacts on refugee resettlement and immigration overall, offices closing, staff being laid off, and there not being enough resources that are needed to help our newcomers. Global Neighbors will hopefully be that one-stop shop and partnering with all of those nonprofits and ECBOs to continue that work in supporting immigrants and refugees. So areas, that we will be looking at towards sustainability and what it would entail to keep this going is really looking at public-private partnerships. I think it's imperative that when we look at the impact refugees and immigrants have had on our community through that economic lens is how do we leverage some of our larger employers, some of our larger corporations who have benefited from refugee and immigrant labor and helping to gain their support in these efforts. I'm happy to say that we've had robust and fruitful conversations with some of the big players in town. It's just a matter of kind of securing, what those partnerships and collaborations look like. But public-private will be imperative. Community investment goes without saying, not just from the broader resettlement and immigrant network, but looking at maybe unorthodox and non-traditional partnerships and how to mesh those two worlds together and helping support these communities. Because what benefits refugees and immigrants benefits the broader community. And I think that's a message that needs to be hammered home, especially during this time. And then lastly, looking at different coalitions and networks around cooperation and collaboration that I think are vital to the sustainability, not only for the refugee and immigrant network, but to the overall community impact and integration when we talk about economic mobility and successful integration of folks to Polk County and across the state. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie to talk about some of those collaborative missions.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Can everyone hear me okay with the mic? Okay, awesome. So again, my name is Stephanie Moris. I'm with the Refugee Alliance of Central Iowa. I know there's quite a few people in the room that we've had a long-standing relationship with, and that have been to many of our events. And so I'm just going to provide some information about kind of the history of ROSI, why it was important, where it, how it's adapted over time, the rules and places and spaces that we serve in now, and how that ties back into global neighbors, and then where we go, moving forward as this landscape changes, what seems like every day. So ROSI is a collaborative. We're a coalition of people who want to see Iowa being a welcoming place for refugees and immigrants. So there's no dues, there's no obligations. If you show up to quarterly meetings, if you interact, if you care, you're a member. We were founded in conversations that began in the early 2010s, and the organization became a formal collaboration in 2014. And really, there were a lot of different community partners who were doing a lot of this different work in siloed areas, or there might be a scholarship opportunity or an RFP or a training opportunity or jobs available, and not everybody had a way to communicate all of this together. The community, Iowa, we have a long history of showing up for our communities most vulnerable, for bringing refugees all the way from Vietnam in the 1970s, and being a welcoming place for people from Bosnia, from South Sudan, and a lot of other countries since this modern program actually began 50 years ago this year. So there were a lot of people that really cared, a lot of organizations, churches, other congregations, organizations, community groups, individuals. So ROSI offers kind of a centralized table for everyone to come together to hear what's happening within resettlement, but also within immigrant communities outside of refugee status. So we formed in 2014 and really tried to make sure that everybody was collaborating as much as possible because, as I'm sure everyone in this room is aware, nonprofit funding is limited and becoming more limited. So making sure that we were leveraging all the dollars available to the best of our collective ability. So we work with all 4 refugee resettlement agencies in Iowa. It is central Iowa, but we work with people across the state. Local governments, schools, health providers, mental health providers, direct service providers, and really, most importantly, no offense to everyone else in the network, but our ethnic community-based nonprofits and other refugee and immigrant community leaders, because their input is really what drives the majority of our work. So our work is shaped by our steering committee. So there's 14 members, and 10 of them actually come from refugee or immigrant lived experience. And of the 4 that don't, 3 of them moved back to the United States in immigration processes for spouses. So we, by default, we have a little bit, we know what that experience can kind of look like from an immigrant perspective. We also have work groups that I'll talk about in a little bit, the work groups were formed based off of identification of unmet needs in specific sectors, and they're regularly meeting. Our ECBO leaders, we are constantly meeting with ECBO leaders or community leaders or faith leaders to seek their feedback and input, and of course the broader network as well. So as I mentioned, we have 4 quarterly meetings, and this traditionally we hear from the resettlement agencies, the Iowa Bureau of Refugee Services, and then all of our work group updates, and then everyone else as well, to just really give people an opportunity to hear the most up-to-date current resources and opportunities, but also what are the current needs. We also have a weekly newsletter that goes out every Thursday morning. It's lengthy, but I try to keep it very scrollable. My goal is 5 minutes or less. So, this event's happening this date. If you want more information, here's a link, here's a contact, but something that you can get through hopefully pretty quickly. Immigration updates, the executive orders coming out from this presidential administration, jobs, training opportunities, funding opportunities. We post all of that there so that everyone has this information at the same time, that it's not just word of mouth, that it's not who knows who, it's not luck, that you hear about funding opportunities, it's everybody hearing together. We also maintain a website that I'll refer to a few times that has a lot of the resources we're going to be talking about posted there, and then ongoing community meetings. The work groups that we have, so we have an advocacy work group, and this works on advocacy measures at the federal, state, and local levels. We have our Iowa Refugee and Immigrant Day on the Hill, actually happening next Wednesday. So we'll be there at the Capitol to talk about, to educate people about what's happening in resettlement and why the refugee resettlement program is such an important part of our state. We also have an economic mobility work group. This was a combination of housing, employment, and financial education, because those three things are so integrated with each other when it comes to people's ability to be able to adapt, to move beyond just basic survival and into thriving. We have an education work group, and this focuses on both K through 12 and adult, post-secondary. We have a health and mental health work group, language justice, which helps, with interpretation needs and how, helping people understand that this isn't just like something that we worry about down the line. There are real long consequences that can happen when we ask kids to translate, for example, for their families, and how it creates gaps in people's ability to be able to seek basic health care, legal needs, education, all of these things that you may not think are so related, but are, and then legal, of course, as well. Although our legal work group oftentimes, they meet when there are emergencies and are otherwise usually very busy all day, every single day, the remainder of the year. So what do? People always ask, what does Rossi do? We're, not being a direct service provider like a resettlement agency, we wouldn't necessarily be able to say, we resettled 135 individuals last year. What we do is much more of a macro lens. And so one of the things that we, when it comes to the education piece, I always like to break it down into like outgoing and then incoming education. So we provide information to the broader community, what's happening in resettlement, what impact do those changes, like all of these executive orders, what impact does that have on our community? Immigration updates. We all work with a lot of different communities. So when there are changes in TPS, right, which are happening often, to our Venezuelan community, to our Haitian community, getting that information and accurate information out, including follow-up legal resources out to as many people as possible that need that help, as quickly as possible is so important. Community events, our ECBOs regularly have fundraisers and other community celebrations, and having the other, the native-born community show up to be supportive of these events is so important for a lot of these communities. And then engagement and volunteer opportunities too. Because a lot of the successes that resettlement has had over the last 50 years is in large part due to the broader community stepping up and doing what they can to help support our newcomers. When it comes to the incoming information, COVID-19 is a great example. We have in Des Moines Public Schools 148 different dialects. So that's 148 different ethnic communities represented in one school district, which on a phone call with someone from the Atlanta, Georgia school district was more than Atlanta, and I was really proud of that. But when we talk about a pandemic or a derecho or other disaster responses, getting information, remember when COVID first started and we got new updates and new advice and we were told to do something different like every 2 weeks? Well, breaking that out into 148 plus different languages is a feat, right? It's something, it is a task. It was a big task that was put on the shoulders of a lot of our ECBOs. So, if they're not able to call 911, non-English, non-Spanish speaking individuals cannot call 211. So how do we help them receive the most up-to-date information about COVID? How do we get them, how do we make sure that they're staying safe? We're talking about communities that were disproportionately exposed to and affected by COVID. How do we make sure that we're making sure, or how are we making sure that everyone is staying as safe as possible? How do we get people vaccinated? How do we get information out about that? How do we offer clinics? Immigration and legal updates. There are real things happening, it seems like weekly, that will have a large impact on these communities. We need to make sure that we're getting trusted, verified information out to as many people that need to hear this as possible. And then, of course, those funding and training opportunities. A long time ago, before COVID, it was a lifetime ago, like 10, 15 years ago, when there were funding opportunities, when there were RFPs or scholarship opportunities for students, when those things happened, a lot of times it was kind of word of mouth or who know who, what program are you enrolled in, this person I work with knew about this. So we want to make sure that those opportunities are really shared as equitably as possible. The work groups meet monthly, some meet every other month. Our legal work group meets when they need to. And they all have different outcomes. Sometimes it's just responding to current crises. We've had a mental health work group, project that helped our Bhutanese community really progress forward in the area of mental health by about 3 generations in less than a year. We've had work groups that have done a apartment complex was being transformed into condominiums, and there were 38 families that were going to lose Section 8 if there wasn't teams that went in to help them with the transference and finding new apartments, and that was done. So there are a lot of different work group outcomes that happen all at different times, but they are meeting regularly to make sure that, one of the great things about RASI and this network is our ability to be flexible and to adapt. Like during COVID, I never thought I would be delivering personal protective equipment to, 25 different ethnic community-based nonprofits, or opening and managing a warehouse during the Afghan arrivals. Or helping people GoFundMe funeral expenses. I mean, things that I never knew I would be doing when I stepped into this role back in 2018. But our ability to be flexible and to adapt and be relevant to what the current needs are has been really, really important. We also help plan 3 annual events. I mentioned the Iowa Refugee Immigrant Day on the Hill. So again, this will be happening next Wednesday. Our goal, from Rossi's perspective, is to provide an opportunity for community leaders from refugee and immigrant communities to come and learn about this civics engagement process. So Iowa Migrant Movement for Justice offers a training that we partner with where we train community leaders. How are bills made? Who does what? How do you contact your elected representative? Why is that important? How do you do that? Really to try to do what we can as a network to empower community leaders to have what they need to be able to advocate on behalf of their own communities, because that, at the end of the day, is our main goal. We also help organize the World Refugee Day celebration. That is a date that was established by the United Nations. It's June 20th, and we have historically helped this will be our 12th year, plan a very large celebration. So we fundraise, and then we purchase food from refugee and immigrant-owned restaurants. We hire different ethnic groups who come and do performances. There's dancing, fashion shows, there's poetry, singing, tons of music, spoken word, drama. I mean, a lot there. It's a long list of performing artists that will absolutely make you cry at least twice. I can promise that. And then also, so we give away free samples of food to the entire community. All are welcome. Have cultural performances. We also have an annual soccer tournament that's part of World Refugee Day that I don't organize. It is very contentious at times. But the winning team, the winning team ends up with $1,000 that they get to choose to donate to whatever ECBO that they want. So yeah, there's a lot on the line there. But I happily turn that over to people that are passionate about soccer enough to be able to sacrifice themselves as the organizers every year. And then we also organize the Iowa Refugee Summit, which occurs every fall. And this is open to anybody: direct service providers, educators, mental health providers, people that work with an HHS, other community organizations. Students are offered scholarships. Anybody that requests a scholarship is welcome to do that. We had over 400 people attend this past year, and it was incredibly comforting to a lot of people to be in the room together in November and look around and see 400 people who had paid and traveled, some from outside of the state of Iowa, to come and to learn how to serve communities better. And that summit, we have some of the most dedicated, passionate individuals, experts across so many different sectors in the state of Iowa who have come and talked about their experience, how we make things work best here locally in Iowa, out of the box problem solving and solutions and ideas. It is an incredible day full of extremely valuable content, and would recommend anybody who hasn't attended to come and be with us next year. When we were looking at the long-term sustainability of ROSI and our next steps, we were very lucky that the Welcome Center Global Neighbors project was happening, because ROSI then moved formally under Polk County and will be housed out of the Global Neighbors Center when it opens. And yeah, we talk about the empowerment of ECBOs and making sure that, that at the end of the day, the efforts that we're putting forth, the programs that we're offering, the classes that we're offering, the volunteer work that we're doing, that we are doing this from a lens that helps to empower communities to have what they need to be able to serve themselves, to advocate on behalf of their own communities, and hopefully, be in positions of decision-making and elected spaces and leadership spaces down the road, so the role of ROSI can adapt again and not have to serve as a liaison in some of these roles. So yeah, thank you again for having us, and I'm sure that we'd be happy to take any questions too. Thank you.
All right, so as Stephanie and Mak said, we're going to move into a Q&A portion. And so if you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic.
Got a question right here. Oh.
In this increasingly conservative era, are you seeing pushback yet politically for the funding of the services you provide?
Yeah, and definitely a relevant question. I appreciate you asking that. With the new makeup of the Board of Supervisors, it is 3-2 Democrat Republican. With that said, this has been a nonpartisan project and support of, and I say that because it's visible and evident to us that a project like this doesn't really adhere to those political winds, although affected by them. The work itself speaks for itself. We are helping our neighbors and our residents towards a successful, hopefully, opportunity of becoming an Iowan. And so when we talk about the services that we are going to provide or what will be housed within Global Neighbors, it's resources, that's dollars being used towards programming and resources that go beyond what we see at the federal, local, or state level. We're talking about engagement and education around what it means to buy a house. We're talking about English classes. One of the big pushes, English being the primary and only recognized language, not for Iowa, it has been for some time, but across the country. Historically, English classes have always been offered, whether for newcomers, whether that's in a faith-based organization, whether that's in a nonprofit, or anywhere in between. So we have not experienced any political pushback, but with any project that is sensitive from a social lens, there will always be naysayers on the other side. And Stephanie and I have been in this space for some time, myself being a refugee. We aren't always seen in the best light by those who have been here and who are part of the mainstream. So our goal is to continue to work, look at it objectively, looking at it at a perspective of education and opportunity to engage the broader community. And I'm happy to say that we've had unanimous support by our Board of Supervisors and those who are actually determining the funding and the future to a certain extent for this project.
I would want to add just really quick, while this project, yes, it's been incredible to see bipartisan support. Even before, we have 2 new supervisors. Before they were elected, we had that there as well. And I think that historically Iowa has seen that. But I would also just want to make sure to pay respect to, we have 4 resettlement agencies within the state that have various sites. And, our Cedar Rapids office, the Catherine McCauley Center, all 20 of their staff were let go. We've seen dozens of people from these agencies. A lot of them were former refugees themselves who know how important it is to be there, both from a cultural and linguistic specific lens to be able to provide that support. So there are agencies that are being impacted, but at the same time, those services that are now going to be needed to be filled, all of those, reading your mail, making an appointment with your doctor, finding a job, filling out a job application in a language that you understand, all of these things that are ethnic community-based nonprofits, but also is incredibly timely that Global Neighbors becomes available because those services, those unmet needs still exist. They're not going away because staff are.
Good point. I think right here.
Hi. I have a 2-part, if you'll indulge me. The first part,
if we can.
the first part is, do the ECBOs have any types of minimal requirements or standards that they have to meet in order to partner with, in order to be included in this project?
Yeah, great question. The only requirement is that you are an ECBO. So we will not be getting into any sort of formal contractual agreements with our community partners. That was also intentional on the front end when we were putting together Global Neighbors, mainly because times are ever changing. And so what one ECBO needs in this moment in time may not be what they will need for the next 5 to 10 years. We want to keep Global Neighbors also as a fluid and transient type of infrastructure or setup, because one of the areas that we will work on is to serve as an ECBO incubator. So what does it mean to run a viable nonprofit and all of the components that entails? We have 2 Afghan ECBOs, both with 501 status currently in Des Moines. One of them is working out of their living room or in their cars helping support their community. They need a space. So that right there will be for them to use Global Neighbors as they need for their community events, for celebrations, for classes, while also learning from some more of the established ECBOs and nonprofits on what it means to run a nonprofit. Once they are, I think my mic, oh, here we go. Once they are able to sustain on their own, then they won't be using Global Neighbors anymore. That'll then leave a space for another up-and-coming ECBO to use Global Neighbors. So the only agreements or requirements that is that you are an identified ECBO representing a particular ethnic group.
Okay, and then a follow-up. I don't know if you've run into this, but we've run into it before in Johnson County previously. We've run into issues where we have always tried to follow pretty closely a non-discrimination agreement that we have with any group that we would provide any space to or any funding to or anything like that, that they would have to, for example, they may not discriminate against the LGBTQ community. They may not discriminate against women. We have run into that a couple times from groups requesting funding where they were not willing to follow that type of agreement, and so we just didn't do anything. And I wonder if you've run into a similar thing and how you've dealt with it.
No, that's a great question, and those realities exist because cultures are different. And so approaches to certain social issues or socioeconomic issues, they span different cultures and approaches to those challenges. Of course, we have those, but with Global Neighbors, it's a zero tolerance policy. We established that on the front end early on when we had our community conversations with the ECBO leaders that self-identified wanting to be a partner and a part of Global Neighbors. And so being transparent and honest on the front end that not only what we're trying to accomplish as a collective, but at the end of the day, we're also a county entity. And so if there are policies and parameters that are stipulated by county policy, we have to adhere to those as well. I think in the spirit of collaboration, that has gone a lot further than actually a written document that says yes or no. There is an understanding and a need for our community to come together, and it's overcoming some of those positions and viewpoints for the greater good. Now, our position is not to persuade or tell anyone what to believe and how they should operate their lives. We are simply offering in a space, and these are the guidelines that we are going to be operating under. If our missions and visions don't align as a collective, then we respectively will part ways. So we have mechanisms in place to sort of assess if it's going to be a right fit. Again, this is led by the community themselves, so we're just, I like to say I'm just kind of a conductor in a large orchestra. It's really the people who are doing the work, and if we do come in contact or see those challenges, they will be addressed right away. Yeah.
Looking at future funding, I was wondering which is the billionaire in the United States that could fund refugee centers in general? And I'm actually being very serious about this because I came here as a new immigrant about 40 years ago, and the country was very kind. It was filled with kind people. That's why I learned to be kind to others. If it was unkind, I would be unkind too. And that's dangerous. You don't want new people to get into a culture of unkindness. The world over, we won't find any other models surviving. So as a model minority, which is model minority community, which are essentially wealthier immigrants who come here, how are we allowing those people to make contributions to recognize the value of new immigrants or new refugees coming in? This is why I work with certain refugee population, because I need to know what was the trauma I felt when I was new and I was feeling lonely, because I've forgotten it now. But I better not forget it, because new people coming in are going to have that same kind of, where do you begin with? We just need to fill a lot more kindness in these economic sectors. And if there's governmental funding that is going down, we better be prepared to raise it from kind, kindred spirits who are willing to give. I wonder how you see the future developing in terms of philanthropic support.
Do you want to start that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that there are some really great experts out there within the United States who have all different websites, social media, big think tanks, individual leaders in these areas who talk about the expectations of the private sector being able to come in and to fill the gaps that are needed by the nonprofit funding, and how, I saw an article just last week that was talking about, discussions of releasing funds from community foundations to increase that by 6 to 11%, and how that is like a drop in the bucket. A lot of the services that are going away, the millions of dollars that we're losing in funds and services and supportive services, that is likely not going to be raised in the private sector. And how a lot of the needs that these communities have will end up falling onto the shoulders of the communities, the same ethnic communities that are already in Central, or in Iowa, and Iowa City too, that are already here, that are going to step up and help, fill a lot of those gaps. And I would say, just from a personal perspective, during our Afghan, when we had the humanitarian crisis after the fall of Kabul in 21, I was blown away managing this warehouse that I never thought I would do. I mean, every day we had people just show up, random strangers from all across central Iowa, bringing in housewares, furniture, money, food, and, you know, we were able to meet people's needs and beyond the diaper pile. Man, that was huge. I mean, it was a mountain. You know,
Clean diapers.
boxes of diapers, yeah. But, you know, it was just a reminder that every day that Iowa has a really long legacy of welcoming people. Iowa has a really long legacy of stepping up to help when it's been needed. And even though, you know, this subject is so weaponized in terms of politics that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I personally saw a lot of comfort and was convinced that there are far more people out there that want to help and do this good, even though it might not meet, you know, the $1.5 million that of the budget that's lacking for these particular programs. There are community leaders, refugee and immigrant community leaders. There are native-born, you know, all across our state are people that are willing to step up and help when needed.
I would say Mark Cuban would be a billionaire, maybe who could help. But joking aside, philanthropy is such a double-edged sword, especially when you talk about this topic and particularly supporting refugees and immigrants. There are nonprofit philanthropic organizations within Central Iowa, our community foundation, United Way of Central Iowa, that have expressed interest, you know, in wanting to get involved and how to support within this particular context. Granted, the dollars that they usually receive are from millionaire donors and in a particular tax bracket who also have certain interests that may or may not align with the foundations or United Way of Central Iowa's of the world mission and vision. And so with the lack of government funding and what we are experiencing, the shortfalls we're experiencing now, the question is, from a philosophical but also practical standpoint, is how are those gaps going to be filled essentially with dollars, and who is going to provide those dollars? We've seen government entities such as Polk County be invested with the Global Neighbors Project. I think that's a win. But then the question is that enough? You know, when we talk about newcomers and the needs and the challenges they face, amongst the other underserved and impacted groups, it's really a long-term investment. So the argument or position that we have most recently taken as a network is really looking at it from an economic standpoint, unfortunately. I think the social aspect has only gone so far and will, particularly with this current administration and the climate that we are in, is how have immigrants and refugees impacted the broader community and United States from that economic lens and perspective. So when you look at larger corporations and employers who have benefited from immigrant and refugee labor, how are they also held accountable to the extent of working with them as partners, as donors, fundraisers, and whatnot? We came in 1993, originally from Bosnia, as was mentioned, and could not have come to a better place. Welcoming, open arms. That's not the sentiment that my family and I share currently. More so my mom and my dad, because my brother and I were young, so we are Iowans. Des Moines, not necessarily Iowans, but we love Iowa nonetheless, and Iowa City, of course. But you know, certain sentiments and feelings have changed. I empathize with what you share, because it's not like it was. How do we ensure that it was the way we had it in the past? And I think having intentional, difficult conversations, but also bringing in folks into the fold, that being maybe non-traditional partners who are in those private spaces that could help support this network and the work that we're doing.
All right, so we're going to run ever so slightly over, but we do have one last question.
I have actually two questions. Yeah. Hi, this is really great. Amazing job that you all guys are doing, and it is a long overdue in Iowa. So my question is, I'm the executive director of the Immigrant Welcome Network. We've been thinking about the same idea. We call it Welcome Center for Immigrant and Refugees, Johnson County Welcome Center. And we've been meeting and doing, trying to figure out how it looks like. But you guys have like all the supervisor over there that would say, endorse this, everybody in the same page, and everything move very fast, especially you have already building that owned by the county. So it was easy. But also you said this is cost $4 million, right?
Yeah, roughly.
We have amazing supervisor here too. But I think you are ahead of the game because you have building already. Now, the $4 million, is this like coming from a general fund, or is there is a grant that the county apply for so they can have this? Like, just I want to know where the money coming from.
Sure. It's general fund Polk County taxpayer dollars that the bulk of that $4 million is actually going to be used to build out the space that you saw. It's not just configuring the internal space from classrooms to computer lab. It's a complete overhaul and renovation of that existing building. So we're talking sprinkler system, we're talking HVAC, we're talking bathrooms, electrical engineering, which is the biggest, largest chunk of the dollars that will be used on essentially bringing that building up to code. Once we are up and running, our operational budget will be substantially lower than that. We have yet to determine that. We'll probably look in the next fiscal year of what our operational budget will be. But those dollars are being used, taxpayer county dollars, to build this space out.
Great. And my second question is, like, you said there is many organizations going to be in the space currently. You already know which organization, and if you do, how many ethnic-based community organizations are in there right now? They're going to have a space. And also for RASI, I agree that you guys have the newsletter every week, so especially ECBO can benefit from that. But how many languages do you have letter for? Like when you send it, like how many languages did you translate it to in Des Moines? Like just to have an idea how many people there from different country.
I'll answer your question, the first part. We have right now 16 ECBOs that have been identified who will be co-locating within Global Neighbors. In 2019, Rossi did a survey, or 2020. It was when you were a warehouse manager.
2021, it was after COVID, it was COVID recovery.
COVID recovery. Really looking at, to gain feedback from the community on not just what challenges people were facing, what we as a community could do better, but it was also organizations that self-identified, we don't have a space, we'd like to be somewhere. And one of the questions that was posed was, would a centralized welcome center be helpful? And so of the responses that we received from those 16 organizations, we then held community conversations with them to come up with the space and the design that you saw. So they will be located, again, it's an on as needed basis. So one organization may not need permanent space. They'll have an opportunity to plug and play, come in and drop in, or use whenever they see fit or desire. So, and that, again, it will be kind of a revolving door for ECBOs, because as needs change, so will opportunities and resources for those communities.
And then for languages, when we were looking at, like during COVID, we had to get information out to as many community members as possible. We had like weekly meetings, and all of those meetings were actually in English. So each of our ethnic communities do have, most often have community leaders who are able to attend meetings like that, hear information, even receive handouts in English, and still be able to disseminate that information out. So our newsletter is actually in English only. We have looked at having that translated. We've explored we actually used to have our website translated, and over the years have really sought intentional feedback from community leaders. How many of your community members are utilizing these services in other languages? And the majority of the time, if people who, if they had language, if there were language barriers, there may also be tech barriers, internet barriers, literacy barriers, or just time to be able to sit there and to navigate those services. And so we have found overwhelmingly over the past 10 plus years that it's usually the community leaders direct service provider case managers of the different organizations, faith leaders who are disseminating these opportunities and resources out into their communities. And they're the ones, that are kind of paid to do that during the day. If they're, working with like Monsoon, for example, or NISA, and, are paid to be a case manager, then part of that case manager is resource navigation. Yeah. And so we have yet to have a community let us know or give us feedback that they were unable to disseminate information or resources out to their community because it wasn't translated. Yeah, so we even switched websites to a much more efficient website that we were able to project more resources onto, and lost that translation capacity after lots of careful feedback.
Yeah, great. I guess the last comment I want to say, I'm glad that you are also have immigrant background and you're leading this effort, because I think we want to see the people who really have first experience bringing this to the table. And even though you came here like little and you are Iowan, but you
More
saw,
hair too,
yes, you saw your parents going through the struggle as immigrants, and I think that's also like a plus. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. And I would just offer one bit of advice and consideration as Iowa City, Johnson County is potentially exploring a welcome center is we brought the community back to showcase the design and to gain feedback from them sort of in this next iteration of the phase and construction and development. And it was shortly after some of the executive orders came down. One of the biggest concerns that people had was not just safety on how is this building going to be structured to address safety from a public safety perspective, but also a security system and everything in between, but also removing the name Welcome Center. Not it being called a welcome center, but sticking to global neighbors. And so for you and I and for everybody in this room, Welcome Center objectively seems like, wow, this is going to be great, but it may give a different connotation to the broader community, which would compromise one's safety and security. So as you embark on some of those discussions, keep in mind that maybe having a different name or just asking your community how they're feeling and getting that feedback.
No, not necessarily that's the name, but I just mean like the concept.
Of course, yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, if we could.
Yeah, thank you.
Turn the mic off too soon, but you all knew what I wanted. So thank you, Stephanie and Mak, for joining us today. And thank you to you all for joining as well. Don't forget, our next program is going to be on Saturday, March 29th. It's called Green Architecture, Building for the Future, with Keith Porter, Sally Obernolte, and Deb Schollerman. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.